you good people. We're just past 8 o'clock. Good, law-abiding but lawfully rebellious people. Welcome to Pewsey, welcome to Wiltshire, welcome to Inquiring Minds. What can I say? John Harris.
I do apologise for starting late. I've got an habit of being late for everything. I'll probably be late from my own room, but there you go. That's me. That's why I am. I can't conform to anything. Thank you for turning out tonight. It's lovely to see you all. And I know that some of you have come from quite far, which always shocks me. It was, you all right, mate? You do come some great distances, and it always shocks me massively that the fact that you do travel so far to listen to me talk or go off or whatever you want to call it. I changed the way that I do talks a little while ago because I was carrying an arrogance with me. It's something I've been noticing. I don't know if many of you, if you watch the YouTube videos of other people and that, but there's this real arrogance about saying that what we're saying is the truth. But that's incredibly arrogant to say that to someone. That, you know, so all I say to people now is that it's a perspective, it's a view on life, that's all it is. It's something that everything that I'm going to talk about tonight I've looked at, the information comes from people just like yourselves. There's, you know, every bit of information I possess comes from people who've told me things and I just bothered to listen, which is not, you know, we find it hard to actually listen to what people are saying, especially if people are saying something that is against our belief structure, whatever that might be, whether it be politics or religion or, you know, the way other processes of conformity that we believe that we have to rely on. Meaningless discipline, I call it. Disciplines that we believe that we should hold dear to our hearts, where in fact are not. They're what the mind is generating just so we can be part of the conformity every single day. So a lot of my life, I've sort of questioned things quietly. I'm very shy. I know it don't seem that way. It's quite an achievement. I don't say that arrogantly or big-headedly or egotistically or any way, but it was always quite an achievement for me to be able to stand in front of people and talk. Because I don't like crowds. I was always quite a loner. And when I did open my door, I always got in trouble. Always. Still to this day I get in trouble. You might not like what I'm going to talk about tonight, you might not like my perspective, but I'm not here to debate with you, I'm not here to argue with you either. If you want to argue with me or debate with me, and you do start to do that, then I'll just walk straight out there and I'm going to have a fag, and when you've finished I'll come back. And I mean it, I did it in our weekend, I just walked straight through the audience and said, you crack on, I'll be back when you're finished. Funny enough, half the audience followed me. Which is really quite funny, but it sorted the problem. I'm not here to argue with you. If you don't believe in what I'm saying, or you don't see life through my eyes, you can't. Same as I can't see life through your eyes. You can't hear what I hear, and you can't, you know, this misconception that's out there. We are unique in every single way. Every way. So there's no way that we can ever be the same, because we're unique. And in that lies the problem, but also the solution. We just don't see it, or that's how I see the solution anyway. So you might not like what I'm saying. And if that's, you know, that's fair enough. I might upset you. Please, it's not intentional. I do not come here deliberately to upset people. It's just my opinion, my viewpoint, that's it. So if you can accept that, we'll crack on. There is a bit of language I use. I've got a big thing about words. Everything I've ever discovered in my life is about words. Words are the most powerful thing in the world. They really are. Nothing happens without words. Nothing. No gun gets fired, no bomb goes off. No one does anything without someone saying words. But it's not the words that are at fault, it's the intent behind the words. Now, a lot of people are very switched off about swear words. And I had a gentleman come out of the audience and he said, why do you swear? I says, because it's emphasis. I said it's the intent behind what I'm doing and not what the word I'm using. And I said, and the point is, who said the word was bad in the first place? But I've asked this so many times with many, many audiences, who said the word was bad in the first place? I'll ask you a very simple question, and there's not many people know the answer to this, which is quite interesting. Do you know where the word fuck come from? Come on, someone must know. Do you know where it came from?
Navy, wasn't it?
No.
I think it's German, isn't it?
No. It's funny. Poor old Germans get blamed for everything, don't they? They really do. Oh, poor buggers. I feel for them, I really do. No. This word, yeah, and by the way, a lot of you will realise my son's here, he's 9 years old, but he's got a remarkable ability of hearing what his dad says many, many times, but never repeats a word of it, which I find, in this day and age, quite special. The word fuck come about in the 15th century. It was wrote into a play by a group of monks. So the church invented a word called fuck. And it was put in this play, and from that time, that word became one of the most universal used words in the world. There isn't any other word in any language that we can use like that word. There isn't one. And it's very, very interesting. So I was always told from being about that big that everything that the church said and done was A-OK. So you see where I'm coming from. So if they invented this word, it's perfectly okay for me to use. Right. Like I said, it's intent. And I found that the problem with words is that we take words literally. And instead of, we don't, everything, it's like, for argument's sake, if you're going to have an argument with someone, the problem is that you're taking what they are saying literally, and they're taking what you're saying literally, instead of using metaphor or analogy. If you read a book, the book might be wrote very literally, but what's being said in the words is not. And an excellent example of this is a book by John Bunyan called The Pilgrim's Progress. Now, Heather, my partner, is reading Pilgrim's Progress at the moment. And John Bunyan was to do with the school, secondary school I went to. And also, where I used to live, where I lived in Whitwell, where my dad worked for the Bowes Lions, there's the Bowes Lions estate, and then there's an estate called the Sue Ryder estate, which is Stagano, which is kind of part of Bowes Lions. But there's a wood that leads off of this called Hitch Wood, and this is where John Bunyan used to preach, in Hitch Wood. Now, it's really strange because when you read The Pilgrim's Progress, you're reading about a man who used to be a mason, who's talking about the Masons. You're talking about a man, you're reading about a man who had a monstrous battle with his mind, and it is the serpent, the devil. He calls his mind the devil. You're reading about a man who left his wife and kids in search of holiness, but it's not. He might write it that way, but that's not what he's saying. Because Heather has the ability to read in metaphor or analogy, she was absolutely grabbed by this book, and actually, you know, what was being said in it. Now, you'll read it, a lot of people will read it and find it very religious because of the way it's written. But what you've got to remember is that in John Bunyan's era, and in a lot of the eras, when you're talking about the 18th century, the 19th century, 17th century, books would not be published. They wouldn't allow books to be published unless they were wrote that way. Yeah, now, a lot of people don't realise this. So the fact is, if you were going to write a book at that time and you wanted to say the things that like the way that I'm writing a book at the moment, I've picked up on this. And I've changed the course of my book. The reason being is, in that time you had to write religiously to get your words out. Another poet, funny enough, was a Cornishman called John Harris, who wrote a poem called The Fall of Slavery. And he wrote this in 1836, he was 20 years old. And he wrote it on a corner, it was 1820, so I can't remember now. He sat on a grass bank outside one of the mines. He was a stanner, which is a miner in Cornwall. And he sat and he wrote this poem called The Fall of Slavery. and for some untold reason, he put in it the millennium years. So this bloke in 1836 put millennium years, the fall of slavery will happen in the millennium years. Now I found that very, very interesting. I read the rest of it, the poem, and he's actually talking about masonry, he's talking about, what's the other things he's talking about in it? The last part of it was very, very interesting. He's talking about alchemy, he's talking about masses in one poem, but it's the only way they could write at that time. Now the writers of our day and age are using fiction. There's Dan Brown, there's Webster Smith, there's Mike Patterson, there's, who is it? Oh, Wilbur Smith, yeah, see, I don't even know who they are. I don't read them, it's all my sister and my partner and many of my friends read books, I don't read anything. But the point is, they're writing in fiction, but what they're writing in fiction, they're writing a lot of truths in these fictions. It's up to you to decipher what's true and what's not. It's down to you to decide. So when I started to do my book, I was doing a very fact-based book, incredibly fact-based. And I'll talk about some of this tonight. But the point was, I saw this arrogance in this. You know, there was this real, well, you're not right, I'm right. You know, and that's not, that isn't, I'm sorry, that's not right. It's not right to say that, stand in front of someone and say, well, your opinion's wrong and my opinion's right. You know, that's arrogancy, that's egotism, that's, you know, narcissism, that's all the things that are wrong. It's not moral to do that either. And everything stems from morality. So if you write it in a fiction, then what you're allowing people to do is to decide themselves. They can decide themselves. And that's the big thing now for me. So I decided to change my book from a very fact-based book to a fiction, coming out of my imagination, starting with Akhenaten back in Egyptian times. Deliberately, because he was accused of monotheism, the worship of one God. But I got a feeling that the stuff that was said about Akhenaten and the fact they tried to eradicate him from Egyptian history is very, very apt, and there's a very big... So I've started with him. I do jump to the biblical story, which is a story that will upset anyone who buys into the myth of Jesus Christ. It really will upset them, but it's my perspective, it's only a story. And another thing I realised as well is that we live in a world of stories. Everything's a story. And the reason I say that is that generally these stories come from books. Now, a friend of mine says the written word is the dead word. He calls it dead. And I know where he's coming from with that, because the spoken word is alive. When you speak, you give the words energy. And you can use whatever word you want, and every word, the way that you speak and the word you're using, you can either make that word have a good intent or a bad intent. And there's only two. That's all there is. There's no. So, but the written words, you can put the intent into the word depending on what the story is saying at the time. Now, the reason I say we live in stories is because there's all these stories that emanate from this book called the Bible. It's just a book. And no one can substantiate what was written in that book is true, because none of us were there. Was anybody there? Did you see it? Did you hear it? Did you witness any of these events with your own eyes? That's my point. You can't substantiate. So we've taken things that could be based on hearsay and accepted it as fact. Now, if you go into a court of law, and it's funny if you take the word the law and spin it around, you get wealth. Strange that, isn't it? But it's absolutely true. So any time you go and see the law courts, it's wealth courts. And they're all based upon equity, which is something I'll talk about later, which is wealth. But if you look at the, you know, I forgot where I was again. You get used to this, I forget. I go off on bloody tangents, and it's when my brain kicks in, because it's very dangerous, this thing in my head. It's very, very dangerous indeed. Everyone's got one, I presume. I just see mine as a gearbox. Well, that's what I want it to be, just a gearbox, because I don't have to think to do this. So it's just a gearbox. But the other side of it is very, very dangerous. And I do forget, I've got a very, very incredibly poor memory. But the thing is, so if everything's based on stories, so I can't substantiate anything. So what I have to do is, I have to look at things and say, okay, well I can't substantiate. You know, I've got this image, I've always had this image about Stonehenge. And I've got these two geezers walking around way with shovels on their shoulders and saying, that'll fuck them up 1,000 years, that will. Because it's true. I could dig a hole right now, I could have a lead line box, I could put any bollocks in it I wanted to, I could bury it, 1,000 years later, our descendants dig it up, and it changes history. It's based on bollocks. But it's true. They can't substantiate it because none of them were here to substantiate it. That's my point. So I've been told all my life that there's these books, law books, the Bible. I mean, if you actually look at the Bible and you look at it the way I look at it, you see a copy of another book called the Book of the Dead, which was the Egyptian Bible. So it's just a copy of another book. And I'm like, hold on a minute. And then you look at the story of Jesus, and it's mirrored in 26 bits Horace and Seth. And it's like, hold on a minute, they're not very original, these people. Well, they can't even come up with a new fucking idea, they just copy what's happened before. But that's the truth of it, though. You know, alright, I might be out of order by saying that. But the thing is, to tell me to believe in a book that I can't substantiate as being right or wrong or true, or whether, you know, these events, which are some of the events that go on in that book, are like saying about Star Wars. To be quite honest with you, these things just can't happen. Joshua, I'll tell you a funny story actually. Before Joshua went to school, he was 6 years old, and it's Easter. So they're doing all about the resurrection, and they're doing all about this sort of stuff, and you know, because that's what they do. Anyway, he comes home and he says to his mum, "Teacher lied to us today." And Kev said to him, "What do you mean? She lied?" He said, "Well, we're talking about this resurrection thing. Jesus died, and 3 days later he come back to life." He said, "But human beings can't do that. This is a child of 6. He's seen through it instantly. Because what he's done, he's gone logically, human beings can't do that. Okay? It's like all the things that exist in that book, and it's like, a friend of mine, actually, he's amazing. He's probably one of the most literate men I've ever met in my life. If there's a book exists he hasn't read, I'd be very surprised. He knows so much, but he's very objective with it as well. Doesn't necessarily believe, and this is what Heb's got the ability. I can't do that. I can't read stuff because it affects me. And I really mean that. That's why people send me videos, they send me things to watch, they say, "You've got to read this book, you've got to see this blah, blah." And I say, I can't do that because it generally does affect me quite badly. I have to stay clear of it all, and anything that's going to come to me, I have to allow it to come to me. I know it sounds bizarre, but it's true. If I want to know something, then I just ask, and it comes. It really does. Someone will phone me up and tell me what I need to know. It has happened so many times. Now, the last time I talked like this, I got locked up for a year in an asylum. Really did, when I was 14. They locked me up in Hill End at St Albans, which is a proper asylum. And we've just recently been to a museum in St Albans when Joshua was off school, and they've got a display about Hill End Hospital, and they've got a lot of people on video saying, "Oh, you know, this is a wonderful place, and there was all this facade and this wonderful building, and they're showing all this stuff and everything." But what they're not telling you is that behind the building they're showing you was a kids unit where kids were under lock and key at 9 years old being banged up to the nuts on Largactil, which is liquid cosh. They don't tell you that. So I said to the lady at the museum, "You've got to tell both sides of the story. You can't just tell one." I said, "You're glorifying something. And you really are glorifying. You don't know what went on in that place. You weren't in there. I was. 30 years ago I was in there. And I'll tell you what goes on in that place. But I can't see it on any of these walls. All I can see is you describing a place of splendour, where it's a really happy place to be. I'll tell you what, you go there for a week, come out after a week and tell me if it's an happy place to be. As kids, in there, we had a lot of fun. Because we started to play the game, play the system. Because there was so many rules and regulations, but once you got used to how, we had to be educated because we were kids. But we didn't want to be educated because that's not fun. I don't want to be educated. That's the last thing. I've actually worked out recently that the most intelligent people in the world are actually the most fucking stupid. And it's my perspective because they're the ones who actually believe that life can only be this way. They're the ones who won't accept that we've had politics for 2,000 years and religion, and look at what we've got as a result of this. They can't accept that if we carry on the way we're going, there is only one inevitability, that we will wipe ourselves off the face of the planet. But they can't accept that, so to me that's stupidity. In its essence, it is stupidity. They're the ones who go and make mistakes over and over and over again, but fail to recognise they've made a mistake. That is the definition of stupid. To fail to recognise from your mistakes. That is the actual definition. And people say to me, I had a man on a door, right, and his leaflets through the door. Every day, this was around the election time, right, so they got the salesman, because they're only salesmen with a sales pitch, that's all they are. See, politics is built on lies, and religion's built on lies, that's why they have to recruit, because the lie dies. This is why it's rammed down our kids' throats all the time, because they have to have new cogs coming through, because the machine will stop working if the cogs are not replaced. That's why you had the universities, the one language, universe, one language. One language with 1 in 10. This is why you have the stepping out procedure. I've been to a cathedral and watched these people getting, they've got funny hats on. They're like square things. I don't know what mitres, aren't they, they're called? They've got a tassel off of it. I stood in there and I had jeans on and a t-shirt as I was doing. This was in Durham Cathedral. I was up there doing a talk and the people, I stayed at their house, Alan, lovely, lovely lady, and Francis. They took me around Durham the next day. It's a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance, go and have a look round. It's lovely. It's really, really... We ended up in this bloody great cathedral. And we guys in there, and there's all these televisions. And there's all these people, like yours, a lot more of them, all suited and booted to the hilt. There's big marquees up, there's people getting pissed. And I swear I smelt weed as well, while I was walking about. What could I have? I smell stuff. And, so I'm stood there, and I'm stood right at the back like this, and I'm watching this procedure, and there's these people up the other end of where I am, and they've got these funny costumes on. And they're really, really bizarre costumes. And I turned to Alan, and because sometimes I sometimes speak a bit louder than I should do, I said, look at their funny costumes. And they weird out. And what is it with all these funny costumes that they wear? But then I realised that if you're playing in an act, and you're an actor, then you have to wear the costume that that actor needs to be that in that act. The same as a television star will, or a film star will don whatever he needs to make you believe he is that part. So if he's playing a Nazi, he wears a Nazi uniform. If he's playing a Marine, he'll wear a Marine uniform. Or, you know, all these different aspects. Well, these people in the cathedral and the people in the courts and even the police are doing exactly the same. And when I saw it that way, I kind of went, hold on a minute, they're called Acts of Parliament. So they're issuing an act, and the actors will play it out. And I've talked about this before. You know, barristers, has anybody ever been to court? Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of you who've never been. Take half hour out of your time, go down to the magistrates' court, or your local magistrates' court, and go and sit and watch. Just go and watch, okay? You'll have the best giggle ever. I'm deadly serious with you, you'll have a great giggle. If you really know what's going on in that court, you will have such a giggle. And if you do it after you've listened to what I've said tonight, you will laugh even more. I recently went to a Crown Court with a friend, and I didn't go there to help him, because he didn't want any help. He's an ex-Hell's Angel. And he's an interesting fella. He's a great mate, I've known him for about 30 years. And he's a typical Hell's Angel. He's He has generally got an heart of gold, but he's honest. He's absolute. So if he's done something wrong and you ask him, he'll tell you. He won't hide the facts. He'll hold his hands up and say, yeah, I did it. And what are you going to do? So they'll do whatever. And he's done some pretty awful things. And I can say what he's done is right or wrong, because that's not down to me to judge him. That's down to him to sort out his stuff. So I've got to sort mine out. And the point is, he wanted to lift up, so I was literally a taxi driver that day. We'd gone in the court, and first off, we'd met this bloody great thing like this, and you've got to empty your pockets, and your bloody change, and all this crap, and you get it all out, and you've got to make sure I've got a belt on, mate, like that, and all that. Look, this is it, because this thing's going to pick up metal. You walk for it, and then this geezer comes up to you, and he's got a wand thing, a bit like Star Wars, like this all over the old body, right, everywhere, literally. All right, you're okay, mate. I walked through it, nothing registered, walked up the stairs looking for a coffee machine. Everywhere I go, the first thing I look for is a coffee machine. I don't care if the coffee tastes crap, I want a cup of coffee. Anyway, the barrister come across, and he was a really nice guy. And I'm chatting away to the barrister, and he's old school. Now you can tell an old school barrister, because his wig's not quite on straight, he's got an egg stain on his collar here, he's got pretty much pot belly, he's unshaven, because he knows it's just bollocks. Okay, he knows. He's walking in there and he actually doesn't give a toss, to be quite honest with you. It's just a job. That's it. He was a great fella, and a real good chap. Loved it. Goes into, but while I'm talking to him, there's all the novice barristers. Now you can tell a novice barrister from an old school barrister because they're wearing the suits and they're all like this. They're walking around, they talk like that. And this is what they do, watching when they get in the court. This is phenomenal because they go from that to a scared little schoolboy or schoolgirl. And they daren't put a foot out of place. They daren't fart. Watch it. Go and watch it for yourself. You'll love it. Watch them outside and watch them inside. And you will see the biggest transformation. They are scared shitless. That judge burps. They quiver in fear. You are going to go in there and anyway, I've sat in this. So I've gone to the public gallery, as they call it. And I've sat in this public gallery, which literally is a couple of these chairs at the back of the court. There's this dock, big glass box actually, and Terry's in there, my mate, he's actually in there. And I can't see it, it's kind of like, this literally disappeared in this mirror, massive amount of glass. There was a barrister sat next to me who was nodding off. He was going to sleep. And he started to snore. And I was going to wake him up, because I knew the judge had the up. He had to right up this judge, he really did. And he was pompous. He sat up there like this, and had his glasses down there, and he was looking down at everybody. And this one barrister, who happened to be a lady, she kept piping up without being told to speak. He got a right up. He says, one of the last privileges I have left is that when I talk, no one else talks. Directed straight at her, and she just grinned, smirked. Terry's barrister turned round to his counsel behind him, because I don't think you probably don't know how the Crown Court works, but you're not allowed to. The barrister can't talk to the accused or the defendant, they have to talk through a solicitor. It's complete and utter. He turned round and the barrister's going like, he's got a bit of paper like this, and he's grinning all over his chops, he's laughing, but he don't let the judge see he's laughing. Because the way the judge was acting, it was pathetic, he was like a spoiled child. It really was. So anyway, there's a lot going on. This barrister's snoring by the side of me, and I really was going to shake him on the leg, but he did actually wake up. He kind of went like that, looked at me a bit strange, and went back to sleep again. But the point was, it was on the way out that we stood talking to the barrister again. We said blah, 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 blah. And basically what the judge did, and I picked it up, what the judge did, when he adjourned for reports, he picked up that there was unsubstantiated, this is what I'm talking about books, unsubstantiated evidence, because there was evidence brought to the case that had not been substantiated by a doctor. Excuse me, but the judge picked up on that and said, how can you present evidence that's not been substantiated? I found that quite interesting because he's actually doing his job properly, which you don't get very often. But there is good guys in every walk of life. Just because they might be doing an immoral job doesn't mean that they believe in that job. They might be just doing it for the security of their own families. A lot of us have to do this. A lot of us. It's a hard thing. So I'm stood outside and we were talking. Before we actually went into the court, I like a fag, and obviously can't smoke in the building, as much as I'd love to. But if people don't smoke, then, you see, I've got this thing I carry with me, is if I smoke and you don't like smoking, then I'll quite happily go and smoke somewhere where you can't see me. I'd do that, so I don't offend you. Or, you know, because to me to offend someone is to harm them. It's true. Okay, so that's why I say at the beginning of the talk, if I do upset you, I don't mean to. It's not so I can't watch people drink, because I know that they're poisoning themselves. It sounds stupid, but it's true. Now, you know, people say to me that I have a right to drink. I said, yeah, but by default I have a right not to. They say to me, I have a right to believe in something, and by default I have a right not to believe in it. You have to remember that that exists. A lot of people who carry belief systems can't accept that someone can believe different, because they're caught in the coercion of whatever belief system they're in. So in that belief system, it actually says quite clearly, underlined, anyone else doesn't believe what you believe, they're either talking bollocks, shit, or don't talk to them. Because that's how it works, otherwise their coercion system breaks down. And I'll explain a little bit about that. So anyway, we decided to go out, so we've gone outside, and obviously we've been through the metal detectors, so we're on the way out. We're still outside out in the back. On the way back in, I went up to take my stuff out of my pocket again, and the lady said, no, you don't have to. You've been checked once, you're okay. So we just walked round it, and off we went. And Terry turned around to me, he totally shocked me when he said it, because he just doesn't seem that sort of, this is what's beautiful about doing what I do, because it's, sometimes you meet people who just shock you with what they say, because you just don't expect it to come out of their mouths. And he turned around at me and said, it's funny that, he said, you know, we were out camera shot, he said, we could have picked up a gun out there, and we just walked back in again. And they haven't checked us again. And I said, yeah, that's really interesting. And I kind of, it shocked me with what he was saying, but then we picked up on something else, and he didn't really know what he was saying, but he said, but they're private security guards, aren't they? I said, yeah, that's really important. I said, I'm not going to explain to you why, because you won't get what I'm talking about, and I'm not being rude when I say that, but he wouldn't get it, he really don't get it. The point they're private security guards is because it's a private building, it's not a public place. And this is what people have missed. If you have authority in this, on this island, especially, let's say, for argument's sake, this legally defined area of land we call England, then to hold any form of authority, you have to have an oath to the Queen. So it doesn't matter whether you're police, a judge, an MP, doctors carry oaths, loads of people carry oaths, but you have to have an oath to have authority. So if you have a private security firm acting as though they have authority, then it can't be a public place, because it's not possible. It's not possible, because it's private. It's actually a private place of business. When you're in the court, they call it a public gallery. It's a public gallery within a private building. I've had this out with them many, many times. I've had arguments with security guards at courts. If you go to certain magistrates at court, they actually ask you to produce your invite. They don't say summons, they say invite. Because you're invited to go. You say, no, you are being invited. So I kind of like, after this, because things happen in the way they do with me, I started to look at this public and private. And the easiest way to explain it is your house, okay? So, when you're in your house and you're behind your front door, that's private, yeah? Shut your curtains, no one can see in, can they? It's private. But when you step outside your front door, you're then in the public. That's the whole different ballgame. That's why they privatise everything, because everything's done behind closed doors. And because it's in private, the public doesn't have to know. And that's why everything's been privatised. Inside, private, it's behind closed doors. Tupperware parties. Who remembers Tupperware parties? Remember these, yeah? Tupperware parties, now it's Ann Summers, which I'm not allowed to go to. I had to get told it was against the law for a man to be at that time. Yeah, all right, whatever. I don't know what planet you've just come from. But anyway, these parties are held in private. Yeah? So, I always worked out that if you were buying the goods in cash and you were selling them for cash, then basically there's no accounts going through. And I sort of started to look at this and go, hold on a minute. When you look at our country and you look at the way it's set up, you have a private bank. And the government have a private bank account. Now, that private bank account is filled with your money, if you're a taxpayer. But ring up Parliament tomorrow and ask for a statement. Well, it's your money. You should be entitled to know what it's being spent on. But you don't. That's the point. Because it's being done in the private, not the public. And there's real... I had a man stick a leaflet through my door, and it said vote for Lib Dems or something like that. Can't remember now. Anyway, so I heard the leaflet. It was about the time of the election. We were getting loads of them come through the door. So I grabbed the leaflet out the door, opened the door, legged it after him, caught up with him and said, mate, do us a favour. It's a waste of your time and a waste of paper. You can pick this through my door. I said, I will explain to you why, if you'd like, but will you tell your mates, because I know that you're all in the same game. You might call yourselves by different names, different parties, but you're all in the same game. So will you tell your mates from your game to stop doing it as well? He said, well, we've got to tell you what we're going to do. I said, mate, I know what you're going to do. The same thing you've done for hundreds of years. It ain't going to change. All right? Oh, but this is the only way we can do it. I said, look, I'll tell you what, you answer me a question. One question, and I'll come down to the booth and I'll tick the box. Tell me what one you want ticked, and I'll tick it. Or put a cross in it, whatever you want me to do. He says, okay. I said, one question. That's all I want to ask you. One question. He said, yeah, okay, no problems. I said, right, you lot in local government and Westminster profess you do everything in honesty. Why is there so many secrets? He couldn't answer my question. He said, do you want me to rephrase the question? Do you want me to say it completely differently? Do you want me to, is there something I've said that you don't get? I worked for a professor of economy recently. I did a little job with my son for him, a little carpentry job. I went to move this bookshelf, and it was full of economy book, all about the economy, a professor of economy. So I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, of course you can. I said, all these books you've got on here, it was all about economy and all this sort of stuff. I said, if you had the power to create money from thin air, why would there ever be debt? And if there is debt, surely it's there for a reason. And he kind of said, I wanted to ask my students that, because you just wiped out them books. One question. It wasn't my question, it was my 13-year-old daughter's question. She said to me, Dad, why don't we just print more money? They get it. The kids get it. We can't get it. They can't. This thing that's just happened with this pier. Have you seen this about the pier? It's fantastic, isn't it? It's really fascinating. If you've watched it, watch him speak. Don't take him literally. Watch his body language and listen to the metaphors that are going on. It's phenomenal. I love it. There's a lot going to come from this as well. They're going to sit on it, but it's very interesting. And do you know, I don't know if you know this, but he's Lord Blackheath. Do you know why Blackheath's famous? It was where the Cornish were crushed in 1326, because the Cornish backed Wat Tyler. It was the Cornish people who come up and helped Wat Tyler, and that's when they crushed them. They crushed them in Blackheath. That's why there's a big burial mound there. So when they said it's Lord Blackie, well, that's interesting. I listened to what he had to say, and I went on to Hansard's. I actually rang up House of Lords yesterday. They're great if you talk to them the right way. They're really nice people. And I spoke up and said, look, I've got this inkling that there's something in Hansard's for the 1st of November, column 1538. Can you point me in the right direction? He must know what I was talking about because he told me the timestamp. When you look at Hansard, if you actually ever looked at it, obviously what you're looking at is an edited version. It's not verbatim. It tells you top of the page, it's edited, not verbatim. If you listen to or you watch the videos, you'll see that the video runs for 9.8 minutes, but about 2/3 way through, Lord de Morlaix, of all names, stands up, especially when he was talking about the Catholic Church, which was very, very interesting about the Vatican. Lord de Morlaix stands up and says, my local Lord has been speaking for the last 15 minutes. Hold on a minute, no he ain't. And if he has, where's the transcript of it? So I'd like to know. I've got the Hansard version, the actual Hansard, and there is a bit more to it. He talks about something that's called the three eyes, and I've not gone into that. Have you looked at that?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
No, nor do I. But you've seen the Hansard, the actual quote.
No, I just got the transcript and listened to YouTube.
Right. If you go on Hansard itself, now if you go onto the Parliament site and you go onto the Lords, pick the day. It starts about 2:30 p.m. You're looking for 10:42 p.m. And it's between 10:42 and 10:52. That's timestamp. And what they do is, when a new Lord is talking about a different aspect, they timestamp it. You'll see a timestamp, and that's what you're looking for, that timestamp. There's about 5 or 6 paragraphs before he starts talking. But funny enough, that newspaper, Brian's newspaper, has got a lovely picture of Julia Middleton. Really looking lovely, actually. Very, very fetching in her jumper and whatnot. And the thing is, I'd like to meet her in court. I really would. It'd be we'd have a great time. And I'd actually say, come and sit in the public gallery, because it would be lots of fun. Because I know that she uses all this funny stuff like this when she's talking to people. You know, whether people want to accept that works or not, I don't know. It doesn't matter. What I'm getting at is, there's a panic going on at the moment, and it seems to be going, and it's going right across the whole, the monetary, the finance, the economy obviously, Westminster, local governments are panicking. Why are they panicking? Is it because we've suddenly cottoned on? Where we suddenly realise what's actually really going on? Is it the fact that we reported 18 months ago that council tax, the first 240 quid of your council tax goes to the council's pension. It's called a copper bottom pension scheme or a gold caps pension scheme. Well, I don't know what you call it. But anyway, your council tax is paying their fat cap pension. Yeah? Another payment goes towards the immigration in your area, and the other payment goes towards the regional assembly that you will be part of as 8 of them, isn't it? Now, the interesting part about it was that a little while, only a matter of weeks ago, Eric Pickles, MP, who is a mayor of... no, he's not, is he? What is he? Oh, he's an MP, but he's something to do with the council, isn't he? A local council as well. And he's stopped a load of things going on in this council. He's really upset a lot of people anyway. But he's turned around and said, there's £300 now he's paid to their pensions. So not only is he actually qualifying what we said 18 months ago, this was in the Daily Mail are about 18 months behind us. It's true, it really is true. What you see in the Daily Mail, you'll see, like for argument's that, we would have reported it 18 months ago. But it takes them that long to catch up. Or they're being prevented. It was one or the other. You know, because a paper puts out propaganda, and what does a film set use? Props. It's all part of the theatre game. All the act, it's all part of the act. So, Fleet Street they won't report on something until they look stupid. And when they start looking stupid, then they'll report on it. They will start to push the barriers. There's a lot of good people in the newspapers, actually. A friend of mine knows a couple of editors of the bigger newspapers. The ones that the RAF officers are meant to read. Did you know that's a requirement, an RAF officer? Must read 3 newspapers a day. Absolute fact. One of the questions when you go to be a commissioned officer of the RAF is, what newspapers do you read? And if you don't state one of the 5, you don't get the job. And one of them has to be The Guardian, which is, I don't know if you know, a spook paper. They call it spook paper. MI5, it's their newspaper. A lot of people don't know, but this is, ask anyone from the RAF or the Army high up, they'll tell you. They'll tell you all about it. I've got friends who are high up in the RAF and this sort of thing, and they tell me lots of things. They have things called ante-rooms. There's a mess, there's the officer's mess, and then on a little room, like this little room here with his ladies are sat, and it's called an ante-room. And in that ante-room, there's chairs, you know, coffee and tea and probably fruit juice. You're not allowed to drink alcohol in it. You can smoke in there as well. And there's newspapers and magazines specifically selected, and you have to read 3 of them every day. That's a requirement of an RAF officer, because they have to remain indoctrinated and coerced. And the easiest way to do it is feed them bullshit through newspapers and magazines. That's absolute truth. Ask the RAF officer, they'll tell you. So what am I leading to with everything I'm saying? What is my perspective on the way... do you know what? May I have a coffee? Would that be okay? I'll come and make it myself if you want to talk. I will, I really will. I'd love to do that. Someone comes up and takes them away. I'd love to do it. No, I mean that as well. No, what am I getting at? See, we have this belief that life has to be this way. Not all of us, granted, but a lot of us. And there's probably hundreds, if not thousands of people out there who do actually believe that life can only be this way, that it can't be any other way. And there is this misconception that I've found through talking to people, that people feel that MPs, the police, judges, the judiciary and all these sort of aspects of this system are failing in their duty. That's the consensus. But they're not. That's the point. What I've found through my own, looking at it in my own strange way, is they're not failing in their duty, because their duty was to never do what you believe it was they were meant to be doing. That's my point. I recently put an article out about the police. Very, very interesting article. I found some fascinating stuff by doing the history of the police. I wanted to know who the police were. I've got this image of the police from when I was a child. We had a bobby on a push bike, and then he was all right. He was all right, that's all I'm going to say. It was a nice bloke, deep down, he had a good heart, but he was a bit hypnotised. He didn't really like the kids in the village. We had another, I got in a lot of trouble when I was young with the police, and so I kind of made, oh thank you so much, I really do appreciate it. I made a lot of friends in the police, a lot of friends, and one in particular was called Mick Reed. And Mickey was a bobby to me. He was a real constable, if you like. You know, you can take the word constable now in any way you choose, because it probably, the first of all letters probably precisely describe what most of them are acting like. And I'm sorry, that sounds rude, but it is absolutely true with most of the ones that I've actually met. And I don't know if you've recently seen in the papers that everyone over a certain age in the police force is going to be forced to retire. I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's because them boys and girls remember what police were like.
Yep.
Very interesting. And I had the pleasure of talking to a Chief Inspector of Police very, very recently, and I asked him 2 very simple questions. I said, do you believe that we, as a population, live in tyranny? He said, yes. Now, Chief Inspector's not meant to say that, they're actually meant to say the opposite. And I said, do you feel that the police are a private political army? He said, yes. they've never been anything but. Chief Inspector's not meant to say that. They're actually made to say the complete opposite. But he was suffering from really bad depression. His family were very, very worried about him because he was trying to make a lot of changes where he's a chief inspector of, but it wasn't his foot soldiers that were causing him the problems, it was his bosses. I had a chat with a detective, a lady detective, who I upset her. I didn't mean to upset her, but I've got this habit of doing that. She had a badge on that I couldn't see, and I presumed she was admin, but it turned out she was the detective sergeant. So she got the up. And she told me, on my doorstep, that her bosses were corrupt. So I said, why aren't you investigating your bosses? And I said, I'll tell you why. It's called a pension. Because you've been bought, haven't you, with a pension, the promise of money. I said, it buys everybody. You're not the only one. I promise you. There's a lot of you. And you've all been bought with that pension. We've had inspectors sit in our house and tell us that they'll come and talk to us 4 years' time when their pension actually arrives. Because they then talk to us now because they might lose their pension. Does money eradicate morality in people? Well, according to Nick Clegg, it's immoral not to pay tax. He's the one who said it, not me. I'm just repeating that it's immoral not to pay tax. Okay. I'd love to have a chat with that man. Oh, I'd love to show him what morality really is. I really would. So I started to look at the police in a big way. And what I decided to do was do a history of the police. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to the creation of police. So I went back to around about 1740. And at that time, we had people who existed called thief takers. Now, we also had watchers, watchmen, charlies, Bow Street runners, and eventually ended up with the peerless, which is about 130 year span I'm talking about. Now, thief takers are really interesting people. What a thief taker was, a thief taker would get hold of stolen property, find out who it had been stolen from, and sell it back to them. Sell it back to them. That's how they got their living. That's how they used to do it. One of the most well-known and recognised thief takers is a bloke called Jonathan Wild, who was hung at Tyburn, which is where Marble Arch is now. And that was Tyburn Triangle, was where 24 people could be hung at once. You know, they've always wanted to speed things up, and that's how they speeded it up. They're saying 24 of them. And you could be hung at Tyburn for anything as trivial as pinching a loaf of bread. Yeah, very, very severe, very harsh. You know, I mean, we actually complain about our lives, but compared to some of the people in the world who still live under them sort of regimes, we have a very exceptional life. We really do. Anyway, Jonathan Wild used to run a gang of thieves. Now, what the gang of thieves would do is they would go and pickpocket everybody, bring the stuff home to Jonathan, and Jonathan would find out who it was pickpocketing from and sell it back to him. Now, the interesting part about this, there was a bloke called Charles Hitchens come on the scene. Now, Charles Hitchens was a man who wanted position of status and power. He didn't just want to be a thief taker. So, he used to run gangs, the same as Jonathan Wild. They used to cross swords a few times. And what Jonathan Wild and Charles Hitchens would do is every now and again they'd get one of their own gang, hand them into the authorities and have them hung at Tyburn. Because that legitimised what they were doing. It made them look what they were doing was legitimate. If every now and again they caught a thief and actually hung them. What they didn't tell the authorities was that they were actually in their employ. That's what they didn't say. Well, Jonathan Wild did get caught out in the end and he hung at Tyburn himself. Charles Hitchens, way before this happened, Charles Hitchens decided that he wanted a position of power, and what he wanted to be was under-sheriff of the City of London. There was two of them. Now, how do you get a position of under-sheriff of the City of London? You have to buy it. And the price was 700 quid. At that time, an incredible amount of money. Charles Hitchens' wife's dad died, leaving them property. Charles Hitchens sold it, took 700 quid of the proceeds, and bought the position of High Sheriff. Now, people suggest to me that that doesn't go on. What about every peer in the House of Lords? Are they not popular peers? And how does a popular peer get to where he is? He buys his way in. Lord Sugar is a classic example of this. Right, so you buy a title. Charles Hitchens bought a title. Now, as under Sheriff of London, he got a £100 salary, which in 7 years he gets his money back. It's not a great deal. But it's not really going to give him the life he feels he's entitled to live. So, what they did is, they give him all fine money. So, he would persecute the poor, penalise them, through penalty charging. Penalty charge notices exist today. They existed in 1740. They existed in 1600 and 1200. If you look, nothing's new. So he would charge, penalise, and he would get all the fines. So if he is only accumulating his wealth through fining the working class people, then his objective is not to cure crime, is to create more. Because the more he can find, the more bigger his bank balance gets. Now, that's really strange, because if you actually look at that, let's take pharmaceutical companies. What's the objective of a pharmaceutical company? What's the objective of any company? What are they obliged by law to do? Make money. It's an obligation. They have to make money. Read the Companies Act. They have to make money. It's an obligation. Pharmaceutical companies produce drugs. How do they get these drugs onto the streets? They used legalised drug traffickers, doctors and chemists. It's true, isn't it? They're legalised drug pushers. They're pushing drugs, but it's legal. See, what you've got to remember is that everything is okay as long as it has the word legal stamped on it. That includes genocide, that includes war, that includes any force they want to use against anybody. As long as it's got legal before it, it's perfectly okay. So they've got legalised drug pushers. And what they use is, they don't actually use qualified people to push the drugs, they use people who are only practising. No. You got that, didn't you? In the end, the penny did drop. They had practice. What do you call a doctor's practice? I go to a doctor, I want to know what he's... I want to say to the doctor, do you know what you're fucking doing, or are you still practising? Because you're not experimenting on me, mate. But it's true, is it not? Look at the words. You've got to look at the words. And it's funny that a doctor, while he's practising, is called doctor, but when he knows what he's doing, he goes back to mister. All consultants are called misters. It's bizarre, we don't see life this way, and that's what I'm saying. So anyway, so pharmaceutical companies use doctors who are practising. Remind me where I was, because I've got to tell you this story. This is absolutely as true as I stand here, I promise you. It's from a Welsh mate of mine, and it is so funny. It cracks me up every time I talk about it, let alone... this is bureaucracy gone beyond the point of ludicrous. Okay, this is just so. My mate in Wales is next miner. He's from the valleys, so he's a valley boy, from the valley, from a place in Mardy, beautiful, beautiful place. He suffers from shingles, and it really does affect him quite bad, and he gets it on his head, and I've been told it's really, really painful. I've never suffered with it, but I accept it's painful. He needed to go to the doctors. Now the doctors, literally where he lives, he drives around here and the doctors is there. So on his way past, he stopped and he went into the doctor's and he went up to the cat and said, excuse me, can I make an appointment, please? She said, no, you can't. He said, why not? She said, you've got a phone. You can't come in. You've got to phone. He said, but look, I only live around here and this is on my way to work, so I thought it would just make things easier for everyone if I just come in and ask you for it. Oh look, you've got a phone. So I said, okay, right, because he's quite a comedian as well. He took out his phone. He said, if I go outside that door and phone you, will you give me an appointment? She said, yes. So he walked outside the door, and then he got, right, there's the door, there's her behind the desk, and he phoned, hello. She picked the phone up and said, hello, may I make an appointment? She said, yes. Tuesday morning, 8:30. Thank you very much. They didn't need the phone, they could fucking hear each other. True, absolutely true. That's how bizarre and how mental it's got. But these occurrences happen every single day. Now, Neil, I'll just tell you one more before I go back to the police. I forgot where I was actually, which is quite remarkable. Neil went to this company and he wanted to buy an extractor fan, quite a big one. Okay, not the normal one you get up B&Q or whatever. He wanted this extractor fan. And he knew there was a company in Wales that does these big extractor fans. Anyway, cut a long story short, he goes in there and he stands at the this big plush thing like this, and there's a lady there, and she said, you just parked in the disabled bay. Can you move your car, please? He said, no, I ain't. She said, yes, you have. He said, show me. She said, that Land Rover is parked in the disabled bay. He said, no, it's not. She said, yeah, it is. It hasn't got any markings because the man who uses it doesn't want anybody to know he's disabled. Neil's initial reactions. Anyway, he said, would you like me to move it? Because he is polite, in all fairness, Neil was very polite. She said, would you? And she was very stern in it, you know. Anyway, so he went outside and he moved his Land Rover, and as he moved his Land Rover, the geezer who wanted a parking place drove in, parked his car. So Neil's already on his way into the foyer, like this, and he stood there. This bloke walks in, and he obviously suffers with something like thalidomide, because his arms are about that long, and he's got a briefcase under his arm. And Neil says, he doesn't want anyone to know he's disabled. But this is how fucking balmy it's got. And he's got, I've got nothing against disabled people, and if anyone took that the wrong way, it's not me. What I'm trying to point out is, it's balmy. It's absolutely beyond stupid. I spoke to a copper, who told me, when he sat at work, because he's got an office, he's got a mate who's in an adjoining office. But there's no actual, there's like a glass screen, then a door, which is always open, and then another bit. So there's two separate offices, but there's a door between them. He sits here, his mate sits there. If he wants to ask his mate something, he has to send a fucking memo. He can't go, what was that? He has to go, because it all got to be recorded. In case you're talking about something they're not meant to be talking about. Because paranoia is off the scale. This is really happening. Can you imagine sat in an office and there's all of us and we can't talk? Can you imagine how many memos would be flying about? All recorded, so they can pull one out of thin air every time they want to, and just say, well, you said that, and you did this, and it's paranoia. It's off the scale, the paranoia. It's the same as, funny enough, I was talking to, I forgot your name. Paul. Talking to Paul earlier, Paul works for what I call the correct part of health and safety, because he's actually trying to protect us tradesmen from getting hurt when stupid architects, because they are stupid, decide to do things that humans can't physically do. And machines need to be copied. And obviously there's that. What I've always hit on about health and safety, the fact that I want to walk out and talk to an audience, or talk to people, I want to wear a hard hat, glasses, over his chest and boots and have a conker hanging from a string. Anybody for conkers? But it's true. But he did explain to me, so I didn't know. This is what's wonderful about doing these talks. I always find out something new. And what he explained to me was that the man who would have come up with that theory is nothing to do with health and safety. He's some farmer geezer who works for the council who's just come up with this mad idea. And I thank you for that a lot, because that's made a lot of sense now, because of some of the balmy things that are going on. You know, obviously, the way that kids, the way that when I was a kid, how many of you fell out of a tree? Brilliant. Right? Go and get a group of 12-year-olds, sit them here, and ask them how many of you fell out of a tree. Okay? Never experienced it, because they're not allowed anymore. Yeah, I've got this vision of the future that we're all walking around in them bubbles. You know them suits and they're like bubbles, and it's like you all stop. The wind's blowing, something might fall down, and everyone scoffers. The wind stopped, we can go out again. It's true though, isn't it? It gets any madder. Oh, the new fashion is high vis. Look at it, high vis skirts and high vis jumper. And the reason being is because you might get knocked over. So if everyone wears high vis, we'll be fine. I come up with a theory that opticians are backing headlights and rear lights on cars. Because if they get any fucking brighter, someone on the moon will be able to see them. The whole back of the car will be a light. Some of these bi-Exxon headlights. Yeah, when I see a car coming towards me with bi-Exxon headlights, it looks like a jumbo's landing. You can't see shit. It's like you need sunglasses to drive at night. But it's true. People, you know, have you seen how bright modern car lights are? The back light. It's getting, and how many there are of them. I saw a motor tonight, and one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. It looked like a fucking face smiling at me. But it was blinding me. So opticians, another thing opticians are bought into, HD television. Because it hurts your eyes if you watch it. So every time you're like this and you're starting to squint, what do? Go to the opticians. Who's making the money? This is the same as the fire. So there's always someone making money. Or they're making money from insurance. Or the precaution of insurance. Because the engine of everything is precautionary principle. That's the engine of the legal system. That's the engine that the advocates use. Precautionary principle. If you create a caution, you need a precaution to counter that caution. In that caution, if you create terrorism, fantastic one, phenomenal, brilliant. Oh, whoever came up with that was ingenious. There's terrorists. What are we going to do about it? Anti-Terrorism Act. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm accepting there's terrorism. So what does this mean? Well, we're going to have to take away a few of your things you can do. Oh, what's that then? Oh, well, you can't take photographs of buildings because if you do, you might be claiming interest, getting information for terrorists. We can't put bins in places like London or cities because terrorists might put bombs in it, but we're quite happy to fucking nab you for littering when you haven't got a bin to put your rubbish in. I walk around London making a film in Westminster. I walk around for an hour looking for a fucking bin. In the end, I dumped it by Brian. I upset the poor bugger as well. I really did. I was really apologetic to him because Brian Moore, I don't know if he's a lovely bloke, but he's got a fiery temper, that bloke, and he's really pissed off. He's even more pissed off now. I walked around Westminster and couldn't find a bin. Dents me, why is there no bins? It's common sense that if people got litter, you put it in the bin. But this is precautionary principle. The police work on precautionary principle. And I'm going to get back to the police, and we'll get back to what I was talking about. But the police work on precautionary principle. If you ring up the police and say someone's trying to murder me, they'll say, ring us when they've done it. It's true. People have really had these conversations on the phone with the police. And someone's trying to get the other to the kill. Ring us when it's done, and then we can do something about it, because we can't act before the act. You can't act before the act. That's what I tell you. You can't act before the act. So they can't prevent anything. They're just there to mop up afterwards. Because they want the incident to happen, because that legitimises their presence on the streets. And this is what I'm getting back to, because Charles Hitchens knew that he would, to become a healthy man, he had to create more crime. In creating more crime, he would get more revenue, because he was collecting the money from the crime, from the penalising of the crime. He was getting that money. So the only way he could ever become a rich man was to maintain crime exists, and to maintain that the penalties become harsher and more petty. This is when Marshalsea and Fleet Prison started to kick in. Debtors' prisons. You had to pay to be in there. Oh, excuse me, I don't know if you know that, but you had to pay to be in Fleet Prison or Marshalsea Prison, and if you couldn't pay, you starved to death. That's absolute fact. Everyone who went to Botany Bay was taken from Fleet Prison. And some of the people who were taken over to Australia to Botany Bay had only stolen a loaf of bread. Or they were so hungry that they might have stolen some potatoes or something. Not through greed, through necessity. So Charles Hitchens came up with a really, really simple system. And the system was working. Now, Charles Hitchens was running gangs of thieves. And what the gangs of thieves were doing, and he started to boast about this. Well, these people are very arrogant. They boast about what they're doing. But that's brilliant for people like me, because I look for the boasts. I look for the arrogancy, because it points me in directions I need to go in. Well, in the end, the alderman of the City of London found out what he was doing, and they suspended him on full pay. And the reason they suspended him on full pay is because he bought his position, and he had to keep what he bought. He'd been given the position free of charge, so he couldn't get away from it. But because he paid hard cash for it, he had to keep it. Well, he couldn't do his job, and he wasn't going to become a rich man, so he employed Jonathan Wild to do the job for him. So Jonathan Wild was running the thief takers, the thieves. They were collecting all the revenue. And this was a time when promissory notes started to appear, and money by tender, and paper money transfers. This all started to appear at this time. And that was making, it was quite difficult for the thief takers, sorry, not the aristocracy, to stop their goods being taken. So they come up with a number of ideas, and the aristocracy, obviously, 90% of the government at that time was Silver Spoon Brigade. And so they come up with this idea, and the idea was that we'll create a force of people, because they tried, thief takers didn't work, the watchmen didn't work, they were next to useless. The Bow Street runners didn't really work. So what they did is, in 1811, they experimented in Ireland with the Royal Irish Constabulary. This is the first thing Robert Peel ever did. He didn't, 1829, when they come up with the Peelers, the Metropolitan Police, that was just a copy of what they'd done in Ireland. They always experiment somewhere else. Always. America's an experimenting ground as well, New Zealanders as well. They experiment, I don't know if you know, all new products brought into the commercial world go through New Zealand. If you go to New Zealand now, you'll be able to drink and eat stuff that won't be on our markets for 6 months. 6 months. You probably didn't know that, but that's absolute fact. Go, you know, I wouldn't go there just to do that, but if you do, you know, even though it's meant to be a beautiful place. So, so they experimented in Ireland, and they found it worked really well. And then they decided they would come up with a Metropolitan Police Force, the Peelers. Now, the Peelers were absolutely hated. They were the test. See, the people at the time said, this is what they said, I found this very fascinating. They said that if they wanted a police force, then they should pick who were police. People from their communities who they trusted, who they knew had integrity, they knew were honest. They did not want the government to choose police forces. Now, it turns out the first ever copper with the badge number 1 lasted for 4 hours. Because he was so blind drunk he couldn't even stand up. And it turns out that a lot of them were like this, and there's a lot of stories, and if you want to go and read the story, I mean, Charles Hitchens in the end was done for sodomy, and he was quite light to him. So if you want to go and read the story, go and read the story. But the point is, the aristocracy knew that keeping crime alive was a fantastic source of revenue. They knew this. But they needed protection. Not only their possessions, but they needed also to create state-controlled street life. This is how the police were born. This is what the peelers were at the beginning of. From the Metropolitan Act of 1829, there was the Counties Act that employed police forces throughout the 48 counties. Now, the interesting part about it is when you actually start to break that down and look at it, and you look at it, you can go look at this history yourself, because you don't need me to tell you it. When you start to look at that, I was under the misconception that the police, a constable's duty was to everybody on the land. And I used to speak, I used to do the slideshow with the different coppers on it. But see, when I read this history, it was like, whoa, hold on a minute. Their duty is not to everybody on this land. Their duty is to about 10% of the people on this land. That's why they swear an oath. It's written in the oath. You've just got to read it properly. They are there to protect the aristocracy, and they are there to maintain state control of street life. They never, ever, ever want to solve crime. Ever. Because too much revenue comes from it. The same as in the 1750s. If you really wanted to solve crime, then you would look at the cause of crime. And the cause of crime is poverty. And if you really wanted to do something about that, then you would increase people's living. You give people better living standards, and through giving them better living standards, their standard of life increases, the standard of life of the people around them increases, and the urge to steal is alleviated. Because they have what they need. And through a process of time, the police wouldn't be needed anymore. You could actually go to what was the original idea of what are called watchers. And watchers have been around for thousands of years. Watchers just watch. Just to maintain that the equilibrium stays. You don't need balance, you don't need duality, you don't need any of that now. You don't need bad, full stop. You just need good. And the point is, if you took the poverty line and eradicated it and brought it up, so everyone's living standard was exactly the same. If there's going to be a living standard or different living standards, then surely, logically, that cannot be right. Because to get to a higher living standard, that means that you have to crush a lower living standard. Because the aristocracy only have what they have because they claimed it. You can go back into history and see where complete villages and hamlets were wiped out. And I mean, not just wiped out, they killed men, women and children and burnt their houses because it spoiled their view when they were having a cup of tea on their lawn. Now we read this stuff and we don't comprehend what we've just read. They take this place, this community, wipe it off the face of the planet, whatever means you're going to do with it, by sending the private political army called the police in, or whatever you want to do. Imagine this being wiped off the face of the planet because someone lives in the big house there and they want to see the river down there. We don't realise what actually has happened. And we don't take it in. We hear these tales all the time. No one takes it in. See, I started to look at this in a really, really different way. And I started to see something. And I started to feel, I live in a prison. There's no bars or walls around me. but it's a prison. And after I've had a fag, I'll tell you why.
So we have forgotten that all of nature has life and has roots. More importantly, we have forgotten that we humans have roots. We do not believe any longer that we are attached to the earth the same way the trees are, but we are. In the Russian culture, we still have very strong symbols reminding us of the fact that we are connected to Mother Earth the same way as all plants and trees are. This is a traditional embroidery on women's dress in central part of Russia and in the Russian north. If you open Russian ethnography books, you will read there articles by professional ethnographers who will explain to you that it was part of the Russian tradition for women to decorate their dresses with images of frogs. Is this what you see on the screen? You know, when I look at this image, I do not have a degree in ethnography or anthropology, but when I look at it, I see clearly that this is not a frog. It is a pregnant woman giving birth. There is a big belly, 2 arms, 2 legs, and the child emerging from the bottom. So it is one of the most powerful images of life. Interestingly, in the Russian culture, it is also almost identical in shape to the image of the tree of life. 3 shoots and 3 roots. The fact that these 2 images are identical points to the fact that our ancestors were not making a distinction between the fertility of the woman and fertility of Mother Earth. It was one and the same for them. This is even preserved in the alphabet that we have today in Russia. This is a pre-Christian, pre-Cyrillic letter that is still found today in the Russian alphabet. It's pronounced as Zh, and it is the first word in such words as woman, женщина, or жизнь, life, a sacred symbol, showing that we have the same kind of roots as the plants have. And what are our roots? Our roots, of course, is the land that we come from. Today we are all here physically. We live in Bristol or London or Moscow or somewhere else, but our bodies no longer come from where we live. Even 100 years ago or before the Industrial Revolution, most of our bodies were constituted of the soil where we live. But today, part of what is now your body a month ago was a banana on a banana branch in Latin America. And part of your body a month ago was in a dairy in France. So you know what constitutes physically even our bodies today is now scattered all over the world. And for this reason we have lost this connection to the local soil, to the local roots, and we start suffering from the disease that is not known in the natural world. Of course, also our roots lie in our ancestry, our ancestors. Well, it's common sense knowledge, but really it is important if we do not have this connection. Experience shows that we probably do not have the same kind of life as our ancestors enjoyed. Yesterday I talked a little bit about the significance of words and shared with you the real significance of the word lady in the English language, which comes from the name of a goddess of love, Lada. Gentleman in the English language comes from 2 roots, G-E-N and man. And of course, G-E-N is the word coming from genus or genus. It is the root signifying birth. Genus is the same as kin, as the family. By extension, the word kind means the same. It's being part of kin. This is what the original meaning of the word was. If you are kind, it means that I recognize you as somebody who belongs to the same family tree as myself. So really, the real meaning of the word gentleman is the man who is part of this tree of life. You know, who are we today? We tend to see ourselves as dry leaves on the pavement. One gust of wind and we are gone forever. Part of the reason why we are trying to enjoy life before it's too late is because we are being taught that our life is limited to the life of our body. Of course, many people know otherwise, but this is the mainstream attitude. You need to take advantage of life before it's too late. I've seen a very beautiful cartoon in an American newspaper. There was a man on his deathbed, dying, and his last words were, "I wish I had bought more crap." Now, this sums up our attitude, and it all boils down to our perception of ourselves as separate from everything else. Our ancestors had a different perception. They were seeing themselves as not a leaf separate from the tree, but as a living green leaf or a branch attached to the tree. Gentleman, you are a man as part of your family line. This is what makes you completely human. And then, of course, they were not concerned as much about the death of their physical body, because the tree of life, your family tree, continues to grow even when we are gone. Who of you know or knew until now that the English language has the word husbander? Not husband and not husbandry, but specifically husbander. Not everybody, yeah, some of you know, but it was a big surprise for me. It is still there in the English language dictionaries. You open it and it's there, but it's marked as obsolete. And it's a shame that the sacred word husbander has become obsolete. Interestingly, it has two meanings. One is a good husband in the sense of head of the household, but the second meaning of the same word is a good gardener. Somebody who takes good care of their soil, of their land, of their motherland. And now the reason it's one and the same word is they were not making a distinction between being a good husband and a good gardener. The function of a husbander was not limited just to planting a human seed, this is it. It was all-encompassing. Of course, a good gardener doesn't just limit himself to planting a seed. He first prepares the fertile soil, and then after planting the seed, makes sure that the tree grows and matures, and then harvests the fruit himself and saves some seeds for the next season, so that the cycle of life can repeat itself. By extension, a good husband would not just limit himself to the planting of the seed, but also would create first a strong household to support his partner or his wife, then plant a human seed, then support the pregnancy, then assist to the birth of his own children, and then educate the children in such a way so as to inspire them to continue the cycle of life. This is what was understood as the function of men, of males, not dominating women, but serving them as a good husband.